Hi, my name is Richard Clark. I just want to give you a quick overview of how we can integrate Provar with Flosum so that you can have round-trip reporting from your deployments being kicked off by Flosum through to your test cases being executed in Provar, and those results appear back in Salesforce linked to your Flosum metadata jobs. Here's a quick overview of the architecture stack we use in this demo today. So at the platform level, we've got Salesforce, and we've also set up a AWS EC2 instance, and we've made that visible to Salesforce through some remote access settings. Obviously, Flosum's installed onto Salesforce, but we've also installed our own test results package. This is a package that's freely available and will be on the App Exchange. And this basically allows us to log our results in Salesforce and link it to a Flosum record. On the AWS side, we've installed Jenkins as our CI server. You can use other CI servers, but the demonstration today is about using Jenkins. And within that, obviously, we've deployed Provar onto that server as well and configured our test cases. We could equally have pulled in from GitHub or another version control repository our test cases as well, but we've limited that today so you can see it in action. So our end-to-end flow today is going to be a job kicked off in Flosum, and we've set some parameters up that you'll be able to change and configure for your own purposes. And those parameters will decide when we want to run our test automation and what tests we want to run. So that will pass some parameters through and make a remote request to Jenkins. The Jenkins setup is just as our typical Provar website, information on continuous testing and continuous integration. You'll find full documentation of how to set up Provar with Jenkins in there and how we use Apache Ant to run our tests and execute them. So the other change that I'll talk about today is within Provar, we've always been able to use something called a finally block, and all we've really done is leverage that with our new custom objects that we've put into our new test package, so that when we do a test run, we link that all together to have a complete test run we call test suite, and all the different test cases that have been executed as well. So I'll demonstrate to you how you can link that in as well. Okay, let's look at a bit more detail then, how this is going to work. We have our Flosum org, and in Flosum we've got our org that we're managing, a separate one, and we can create a snapshot. So I'm going to pick one that I've already created. Here we go, demo 2. So we've already done the retrieve on this. It's already worked out what deployment's required. Now I'm going to transfer that to a patch. Just give it a test name and just transfer those. And what Flosum's going to do in the background is when I deploy that, it's going to create a new type of metadata log record for the deployment. So I'm just going to hit the deploy button. Pick my organization. And in the future, Flosum may allow you to select which tests to run within here. So the run test in here is about unit tests, of course. Not the ones to do with Provar yet, but Flosum are planning some changes, so you'll be able to specify which tests to run here. I'm going to show you in a second how that can be configured. Okay, that's now creating our patch. We'll let that run through and count down to do its status check. And just another few seconds to wait for that to deploy. Now, in the background, what's going to happen is we've already done the Flosum job. That's now going to make a monitor using Salesforce Process Builder. It's going to watch that record, the metadata log record, the deployment one. For when it's successful, it's going to make the call to Jenkins using something called Invocable Apex, which we've packaged up for you. So we see here now our Flosum job has completed and it's done the deployment. So let's have a look at that. It's successful. We see there's a new section called Test Suite Executions. So after installing the Provar test results package, what we've done is create a custom field, a lookup field, from the Provar test results to the metadata log record. Now when I refresh this, we'll see we've got an entry in here. Here we go. We've used the naming standard we've just chosen, in our case, to use a test suite and then the current time. And we see here a summary of the test cases that have been executed. We've got 2 passes and 1 fail, so 3 tests run in all. Let's drill into that and look at it a bit more. So we can see here all the different tests that have been executed. So actually it was 3 and 1 because it was still running. So now it's run 6 tests, 4 have passed and 2 have failed. And we've got a nice sort of chart summary as well. And this all works in Lightning Experience as well. I can see for each of those tests that I've executed, I can see the result and I know which of those tests have failed or succeeded. Now I can use standard Salesforce dashboards to report on this as well. I'll just refresh my dashboard and I'll see the information for the tests I've just run included on that. Within the Provar test results, we've included some dashboards for you, both classic and for Lightning. There we go, we see the update. Now let's look at how that's been configured. We have a Jenkins instance, and we can see it's running Provar, and we can look at that job we just executed. Here it is. You see all the tests that it executed, and we've got the same results here, 4 successful, 2 failed. If I look at the configuration of that job, it's like the normal way you configure Provar. So if you go to the Provar website and you look at our DevOps section and you look at our setting up continuous integration, you'll see all the information you need to know. We're also going to publish a separate document specifically for automating your delivery process with Flosum as well, which will walk you through the different steps for setting up AWS, Jenkins, Provar, and the Salesforce packages that we've created as well. So what we've added to our Jenkins job here is we've added some parameters. The first one we've added is something called the external ID. Now the external ID in this case is going to be used for the Flosum metadata log ID. I've also passed a parameter called test path. So this gives us the ability to specify which folder in Provar we want to execute, which tests. So if I skip onto my server here, if we look at my tests here, I've got folders API test cases, success examples, and UI test cases. And each of the API and UI ones, I've got a success and a failure example. Now I can just run my tests at the parent level, test cases, and I'll get all these executed. Or I can choose a particular subfolder. The other option we have is to pass an ANT target. So you can choose which exact specification of which tests to run. So it gets in a little bit more detail about using ANT, but if you're comfortable with ANT and you're okay creating a target, within our Provar build.xml, I've created different API tests, UI tests. And within here, I can do things like change the web browser to Firefox if that's what my test wants to be. So again, I can choose to have those tests. And this is where we're working with Flosum to look at ways in which you'll be able to specify that from the Flosum application to specify which Provar tests to run for a particular deployment. Let's now look at the Salesforce side of this setup. So in Salesforce, what I've done is create a new process. So this is something you will have to configure yourself. And that process is on the metadata log object when it's created or edited. And we've put some conditions to say deployment when deployment's complete. So when the succeed flag is set to true, when the Flosum process type is deployment, we don't want to do this for retrieves, and when the job has actually completed as well. So it won't fire until those conditions are met. Okay, so we've ticked that box as well. Within the actions, we've got a couple of different examples here. So in this one, I've passed some parameters, and this is invocable Apex. If I just copy this, you'll be able to see it in more information. So as you can see here, what I've done is create 2 actions. The first one I've chosen to do to show the separation of parameters. So in this one, what I'm doing is passing the parameters in a comma separated string. So I've passed the metadata log ID first, and then I'm passing the path, the folder of test cases I want to run as well. So this case is only API ones. And here I'm going to run comma separated with UI test cases. Now what I could also do is change the actual, I could change the target as well. So if I add a third parameter, pass run tests as my target, or I could pass a different one again if I wanted to. And that's how easy it is to do. And that's the limit of the configuration you need to make. If I go back to the setup, one other change I talked about at the start, you'll need to make sure your remote site settings include the right instance that you're going to be talking to for your Jenkins. Okay. And then you're ready to run. So let's look at some examples of some dashboards that are a bit more exciting. So here I've configured some within our Provar demo org, and I've used Lightning because I can get much nicer graphs and charts out of this, much better information. And you can just set these up for yourself. There's no restriction on access to this. So how have we set up the Provar side of this? Let me go to Provar. So firstly, we've created a special test case called a setup test case. So that if you go to new test case, you can create one of these by saying setup test case. So we've created one of those. And that's always going to run for every one of my Provar runs. So obviously I only want that deployed on my CI server if I want the login on there, if I don't want it to happen in my local instance as well. And in there we've got a connection to Salesforce. We read in that metadata log ID attribute because we wrote it to a file within our ant build.xml. And we create the test suite object, which we're going to hang everything on. And this is how we link back from our Flosum metadata log record to our Provar test suite. And we also log in the name of it here. Again, you can use expression editors to put in whatever name you feel appropriate for the type of run you're executing. The other thing we've done is create a callable test case. So this test case is been set up and we've marked it callable. So that means we can reuse it. So we only have to write this logic once. And within here, what we do is based on the status that's passed in as an input parameter. So we're using our test result status from the expression editor. Based on that, we're either writing a pass record or we're writing a fail record. Now, there are lots of different ways you could parameterize this and write it with a single call. This is just one of many examples in which ways you could do that. And in this example, we've made a couple of extra calls to update some running totals. You'll find in the package that we provide to you, those things are already taken care of you through Salesforce roll-up summary fields instead. So you won't need to do these two steps. We made it much simpler. Now, within my test case, all I have to do is I add in a finally block. So I've pulled in one of these across, and then I've dropped in my callable test, and I've specified the parameters I want to pass to that. So the test case successful, I've passed in from expression editor, and I've passed in the test case name. So I can log that. And that's how easy it is. Thank you very much. Details of when the guide will be out and access to the package will be published very soon. Good luck.